Hey, and welcome back to Developing Dialogues. I'm your host, Matt.
And I'm Grant, and we're going to jump right into the content today. Matt, what do you got?
So today we're going to talk a little bit about inflation. Yes, I know, the most interesting topic in the world, but I promise this is going somewhere.
Not to be underestimated. Inflation has caused many a strong man to stumble.
It has, and it's getting to a little bit of a scary level that should make us rethink what value is to us. So in just a very brief retrospect, during the coronavirus crisis, a lot of dollars were pumped into the system. In fact, so many that we have a 6.8% inflation rate, as you can see from the screen in front of you. That 6.8 inflation rate, as seen in November, is indicative of a change in the money supply, not in the supply of value in goods and services. So there's the same goods and services, if not less goods and services today than there were at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, but we have more dollars on which to spend for those goods and services.
Now, are some of those goods and services wielding new technology which makes them more efficient, like 16-to-1 gains rather than 8-to-1?
Absolutely. And in an optimal situation,
thus there's less of them.
Right. A lot of those metrics of efficiency are put in place and produce more products for more people to consume with less cost. The problem is that we had a little bit of a, shall we say, a bear year over these last 2 years with coronavirus.
Sure.
And a lot of those advancements that you would expect to see were put on hiatus, if not stalled out completely. So it's not that those types of value generation can't exist, it's that they're probably not as relevant to the specific situation. We might not see a 6.8% increase in those kinds of judgments.
Sure.
Now,
it's kind of the technological advances are kind of built into this, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying they're probably built into it, but might only compensate for what a 2% rate increase in inflation would account for, probably not the 6.8. You know, when people, you might have heard the phrase before, a little bit of inflation is good for the economy. That's not inherently wrong, but this isn't a little bit of inflation. This is a little bit beyond a little bit of inflation.
Yeah.
And Mr. Powell, if you're listening, inflation isn't transitory if it sticks around. So that's just my own personal mantra, but that's how I feel about it.
You can take it or leave it.
The long of the short of it is that what this really represents is a means of value transfer. This isn't wealth redistribution in its more original sense or in some communist Russian sense. This is a means of value redistribution to where people who had large sums of money in the bank before, if that money just accrued 1 or 2% in mass, they still took a pretty hefty loss in the end because they can't buy the same quantity or quality of products now that they could before.
Their spending power is less.
Right. And it's really the people who had nothing in their bank accounts before who were greatly rewarded during the coronavirus crisis, because going from $0 to $10,000, even if that $10,000 hypothetically lost 50% of its purchasing power, would still give you more than the $0 you had beforehand.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a weird situation. When you think of inflation and when you think of the dollar becoming less valuable in terms of negative real interest rates, which is a whole other conversation we'll be covering in part 2 of this dialogue. But when you think about negative real interest rates as it relates to your money as it sits in the bank, just understand that as much as your interest rate is increasing the value, the quantity of your money, the United States federal government is actively decreasing the value of your money at a rate faster than you would be accruing money. Does that make sense?
Intentionally or byproductly?
More of a byproduct of foreign direct investment. A limitless supply of it enables the or what seems to be a limitless supply on paper, enables the United States to send out bond issues after bond issues after bond issues.
Wow.
And never really have fear that those bonds won't be bought up. For example, during the coronavirus crisis, that initial $3 trillion stimulus package, $1.7 trillion of it came from foreign direct investment.
1.7.
That's over over half of our package for stimulus relief came from outside of the United States.
This is at what point during the coronavirus crisis?
This was at the beginning when we had that $3 trillion stimulus package from, it was
like April or May or something?
This was really close to the beginning of the process. And it was actually a bipartisan agreement at that time. But the issue comes into play that foreign direct investment has directly enabled the United States to make such leaps and bounds in terms of borrowing money that's devalued your currency because there's more dollars in the market.
Yeah. Now, it would be remiss of me not to ask does cryptocurrency play into this equation at all?
So crypto does, as a bit of a canary in the coal mine. So in the sense, while crypto is in some situations like Ethereum more of a fungible asset, you can create more of it. In cases like Bitcoin, there is a limited quantity of Bitcoin out there.
Sure.
But there's not a limited quantity of dollars. So as Bitcoin goes up, maybe don't think of it as much that Bitcoin is gaining as much as the dollar is losing value against a more stable currency.
Interesting. Because of who's controlling it.
Exactly. And I'm not...
Or lack thereof.
I'm not actually that pro cryptocurrency. I'm relatively pro cryptocurrency, but I'm not. I haven't drank that much of the Kool-Aid. But the long and the short of my analysis comes from the idea that the issue with using other metrics to compare the dollar other than crypto would be comparing the dollar against the yuan, comparing the dollar against the euro, which are other currencies that are actively inflated from time to time, especially during a crisis like the coronavirus crisis.
Yeah.
So to say that the dollar gained on the euro during the coronavirus crisis doesn't really tell the whole picture because both actively lost value.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it sounds like the coronavirus crisis really did a number on the inflation. Is what the point of this is.
And fiat currency itself, I'm not going to sit here and say that fiat currency has no purpose, but fiat currency shouldn't be compared to other fiat currencies to determine its value. That just doesn't seem like a great metric when neither of them are based in an actual source of value.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So for you, if you have any comments or concerns, type them in the comments section down below. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to get your input on this whole situation. Is inflation something that should be watched with a very concerning eye? Is it something that keeps you up at night, or is it something that I know maybe
does inflation keep anybody except for like Colin Powell up at night? I don't. What's the guy in charge of JP Morgan right now? Damien something.
Oh yeah, okay. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think it even think it keeps Warren Buffett up at night.
I read his book too. In charge of Chase.
We'll add it in later.
Yeah.
This will be for part 2 of the discussion. This is just a very basic cursory overview, and at the very least, I hope this helps you personally think about what's the point of inflation in our currency with fiat markets.
Jamie Dimon.
Maybe it keeps him up at night. But
maybe inflation does. Maybe he just doesn't care.
But whatever it is, tell us your thoughts in the comments down below. And with that being said, Grant, what's on your radar?
All right, it's my turn. Well, my topic for today is a little bit more in-depth of an introduction to 3D printing, because it's a huge part of my life and the projects which I undertake, and I want to have general shared language between us and between you. So 3D printing, right? We're going to split it up into 3 basic types based on the materials which might be used. First, we have plastics, right? Or thermoplastics, technically, because you heat them up, the plastic melts, and you form it into the shape you want. Zerp, 3D print. The second type, right, is resin printing, where we take a vat of a resin, you can shine like an ultraviolet light into it, and it hardens one layer, and then you move everything down a notch, harden another layer, move everything down a notch, shine the laser in and harden another layer, etc. These types make sense?
Absolutely.
The first one with plastic is called fused deposition modeling. Okay? Because what's fusing is the hot thermoplastic is being deposited into a model.
Right.
The next one, the resin printing, that's called stereolithography. Lithograph from the base of picture, right? Stereo meaning sound or ultraviolet light. So a sound picture that you stack on top of each other.
Okay.
The third type of printing, really, that we're going to talk about today of the big three is select laser sintering. And this is the one which is with metal, right? So we started with plastic, went to resin, a little bit tougher, and now we're in metal printing. Selective laser sintering. And imagine there's like a bed of like metal powder, really fine metal powder.
Right.
Then you take a laser and you draw a pattern, and that pattern is hard, right? That pattern has been sintered hard. And then you're going to drop everything a notch, put another bed of powder on top, and harden another layer, right? You're selecting which part of the layer you're going to sinter, right? If you do that over enough layers, it's essentially 3D printing based on the form you create.
Right. I'm guessing the third metric takes the longest to do because you have to, I'm guessing the metal doesn't fuse together quite as quickly as the other forms, as the other metrics.
Actually, metal is easier absolutely the opposite. The metal goes faster, but because the fusing is faster, but resetting the machine for every single layer and spreading a new bed of powder takes longer. So the fusion is really quick.
Is instant. Compared
to the fused deposition modeling, which is the printers I have here.
Right.
And they travel in the whole path and lay down melted plastic on top of each other.
That takes a while.
Right. So these three types of printing make sense?
Absolutely.
FDM, fused deposition modeling, is with plastics. Stereolithography is with
the resin,
and then selective laser sintering is with metal. That's the primary form of metal 3D printing.
Right.
Now, for each of these, there's really three kinds of machines out there. We're going to see that there's industrial grade, right, which is top of the line. They're selling $20,000, $40,000 machines. These are fantastic. I would love to play with one.
But these aren't for us.
Correct. At the other end of the spectrum, those ones will be up here. They're at the top. At the other end of the spectrum down here is what I call skeleton printers. And this is where the company gives you in a cardboard box a DIY kit of like the bare bones of a 3D printer. And you put it together and you 3D print more parts for it. And it's called a skeleton because it's just only what you need, and you can add a bunch of stuff to it, right?
What's the price range on these models?
I'll get to prices in a second.
Okay.
But we're going to look at the one in the middle, right? We have up here we have industrial, and down here in consumer grade we have skeleton printers.
Yep.
And then in the middle we have the high end of consumer grade, and this is what I call luxury printers.
Okay.
Where it's really the same functions as the skeleton printer, but it has all the bonus stuff already made and built into it.
Is this like the MakerBot products kind of thing, or is this?
They're higher end ones. For a company called Creality, they make really good printers, in my opinion. Their S line is the smart line of printers. So you might see the Creality 3S. You might see the Ender 3S or the 10S.
Right.
Okay. Those ones will have smart bed leveling. They may have a material sensor.
Right.
They will probably have some sort of networking ability where you can reach from your computer rather than inserting an SD card each time. And that's the middle range, right? All those things built in are not necessary to the 3D printing process, but they're awesome upgrades to have. You can do them yourself. I do them myself. But the usual range between here is about 4 times or 400%. So if a skeleton 3D printer is like $200, these ones are going to be $800 or $900.
So out of curiosity, how much of a difference in terms of capability is between these skeleton printers and luxury printers? Can they do essentially almost the same thing?
Little to none. But it is really nice to have all the capabilities that they offer.
Right.
But I can buy the skeleton ones, add all those extra functions for like $200 and make them do the exact same thing for half the price.
Now,
which is nice.
Call me crazy here, but the old man Matt's got to ask a question about this. Is there a way you could use people in labor markets that are less expensive than the United States to do this assembly work for you? Basically make the skeleton printers into pseudo luxury printers, sell them at like a 200% markup instead.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if that's an option.
If it is an option, it definitely is, and that's one of the machines I have in the house right now is by a company which is doing just that. They buy the skeleton machines, upgrade them a little bit, and then sell them again. And I'm trying to check out my competition.
Absolutely.
And this is frankly an awesome machine. They did a great job. The guys at 10log are 3D printer masters. They did most of the things that I would have put in there. I'll leave a few comments in the Amazon review. Where was I? We have the 3 types of printers.
Right.
Plastic, resin, metal. We have the 3 levels of printers.
Yeah.
We have skeleton, which is a consumer use, which they're going to run between like $200 or like $500 if you have a bigger one.
Right.
And then you have in the middle are the what I call luxury consumer printers, and they're going to go anywhere from like $1,000 to like $3,000 or $4,000. If it's larger format, if it's going to use a variety of materials, if it's going to be,
for all the bells and whistles.
Exactly, all the bells and whistles. And then when you get up into industrial grade, nothing is going to be really under like $6,000 and up into 40 or 50,000.
Now, does that relationship between industrial grade, luxury grade, skeleton grade, does that exist across all 3 different types of 3D printers you were talking about before, plastic, resin, and metal?
That's a really good question. The answer to that is no. Okay. Yes, it does, but some are grouped at different ends of the spectrum. So plastic FDM printers, they are spread out pretty evenly. Okay. There's a lot of industrial grade FDM printers, and there's a lot of consumer grade ones. There's a lot of them in the middle. With resin printers, it's really split between 2, consumer and industrial.
Not much luxury?
There's not much skeleton versus luxury.
Okay.
In those. It's just consumer and industrial.
Right.
For metal printers, there's a lot of industrial. There's a lot of luxury consumer. There's very little skeleton consumer because it's a much more dangerous product.
It is.
You do not for a regular FDM printer, I could buy a kit and like give it to like my cousin who's like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And they could manage it and be safe. I would not do that with a metal printer because there are high powered lasers at play and that's a lot more heat.
Absolutely. There are safety concerns.
There's no market for a skeleton metal 3D printer currently. There's an asterisk on it. I think there might be, but that is
trying to take over the market
to come in another 3D printing talk here on Developmental or Developing Discussions. I'm Grant.
I'm Matt. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, and welcome. Okay. I'm sorry. It's in my head now.
I know.
All right.